with Expedient. And Mike Ruccio is a principal technologist who's here with me today. Hi, Mike.
Hi, AJ. How you doing?
Good. You're starting to become a regular on these sorts of things. That's fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to thank everybody for joining us this week. We really want to talk through, what's really going on. Before we do that, quick housekeeping note. If you have any questions, please enter those down about here into the Q&A panel. That helps us keep track. Mike and I can absolutely answer any of the questions you have regarding this, or if you have any other cloud strategy sort of questions, Mike and I could definitely help walk you through that. Also, if you miss anything, you have to step away. You'll get a link in your email to this recording. There will also be on youtube.com/expedient, go.expedient.com/webinar replays, instagram.com/_expedient, and linkedin.com/company/expedient. Hey, everybody on LinkedIn, go ahead and give us a like and subscribe on all of those as well. So Mike, I think a lot of people in, on-prem IT sort of worlds are struggling with the hardware cycle, right? I buy gear, I run gear for 4 years or even longer, and then I get rid of it. So how do we break the cycle on hardware? Because I think that's actually one of the biggest challenges of when is the right time to make the move.
Really, the thing that you have to do there is socialize with your management and make sure management understands that at some point you are going to take a capital loss effectively, where you've spent money on something that you have, a planned 4-year investment cycle on. You realize that that really wasn't the correct path and need to change gears, and just accept that you are going to take a small loss on the fact that that hardware is not fully depreciated before you get rid of it. And it's really the most important thing there is just making sure that management is clear on what the benefits are of taking that loss. You're on mute, AJ.
I'm very good at what I do. Is there any sort of how early do you need to start looking at what that loss is, right? Because a lot of companies want to do like a 4 to 5 year sort of hardware replacement schedule, but cloud migrations aren't exactly something that you say, okay, in 6 months we'll be gone. So how does that work?
I think you really need to start looking at that as soon as you identify that the cloud or getting out of managing hardware is the right option for you. So that's probably today for a lot of people who have kind of realized that it's a bad idea to keep running your own hardware. And so you need to start having that conversation as early as possible that, there is a different way here, and we need to start talking about what that actually means.
So what's the sort of timeline on, somebody wants to start migrating to the cloud? What is the usual time frame that we've been seeing? Because we've talked a lot in the past through, our various, presentations and webinars around how customers thought they'd be there by now, and they're not. So what is the sort of time frame that the customers think their cloud migration is going to take?
So most customers think their cloud migration is going to take about 6 months to a year. For most customers that we talk to, if they're trying to do things in terms of, refactoring and do all that kind of thing, you're really talking about several years. And the way to short circuit that and at least get out of the hardware game is to go ahead and actually, lift and shift your servers and workloads to the cloud, and then work on refactoring once you're already there and you've freed up those cycles that you were previously using for rack and stacking hardware and doing VMware updates.
And I think as part of that, I think there's this challenge of buying hardware is very straightforward. I know exactly what I'm doing. When I buy a new storage array, I connect it to my SAN or my network if I'm doing NFS, and I migrate the storage over. There's some application cutovers, and ta-da, I'm done. I don't have to do anything after that. It's the array is up and running, and now my production data is over here instead of being over here. So I think there's a concern that because it's not going to take 6 to 12 months, it's going to take you years, that process almost needs to start in conjunction with maybe your last hardware upgrade, right? I'm going to do one right now, but as part of that, do you see customers starting to say, okay, this is our last storage array upgrade. You've got 4 years. We're not replacing this. So do we see that as an option, as an opportunity there, or is there a different way?
That's an option. The problem then is that you're taking on all of the workload of maintaining that storage array. So, yeah, you do go ahead and stand it up and connect your vCenter to it, and then it's there, but you still need to update that array. You still need to deal with when a hard drive breaks. That's, half of someone's day to work with the vendor, get a new drive out, get that drive replaced. So you're spending a ton of cycles maintaining what's already there. And really you end up not having time to do the cloud migration, and 4 years is up and you still have workloads on that SAN, and now you're buying a new SAN again.
And so this is that cycle that is hard to break, right? And every time it's like, okay, well, this is the last one, but this is the last one, but this is the last one. Or you buy another year of support and you just kind of kick the can down the road. And it's like, nope, it'll still be there when you keep on walking. Oh, look, here we are again. Look at me. It's the consequence of my own actions. So I think there's this, I think that big challenge of like, okay, how do I really, find the courage to actually go make this decision? Because I think a lot of people are scared that like, it's not going to work and that this is their job on the line. And they feel more self-conscious about, how do I maintain my job? I don't want to make too big of a decision, because if I do and it doesn't go well, I'm out. So how do we encourage courage?
Yeah, I think, the first thing that everyone needs to keep in mind is that, that not making a decision and keeping your job is valid for today. At some point, though, someone's going to ask, why are we still doing this? And you're not going to have a good answer for them. So you do need to make that jump at some point. And I think that, where we can come in and where we can help is by being a partner that allows for doing things like, in some cases, still making use of that hardware that you purchased. If you want to go into our PV or private virtual colocation offerings, or just making it possible to actually lift and shift all of your workloads from on-prem to a cloud like Expedience, and then just keep running like you were before, and it's not that multi-year project.
So the business continues to hear that cloud is a thing, right? They go to their own virtual conferences, they listen to their own sessions, they listen to their own things around how their business and their industry is being transformed by cloud, by technology, and all of the digital transformation things that we like to talk about. And all of this sounds like a really good idea, but when we don't have the cloud skill set on staff, I have the potential to make some mistakes. So what are those things that I should look out for as an admin, as a technical person in the organization, when my business is constantly banging the hammer saying, we want to go to the cloud, we want to go to the cloud?
There's really a lot of things there that are potentially kind of landmines, but the biggest one is not paying attention to where your data actually resides and then ending up with giant data transfer fees. So in the cloud, getting data in is very easy. Getting data out is very expensive. So you need to make sure that you're keeping in mind where data needs to live and what servers and workloads need to be able to talk to each other, and account for that when you decide where workloads are actually going to ultimately land.
Because it's almost like we've never had to really think about that before, huh?
Yeah, I mean, not really. Previously you got, your gigabit pipe or whatever to your co-location facility or to your office. And then as long as you weren't saturating it, you didn't really have to care. And usually you just overbuilt that to enough of a degree that it just didn't matter because it wasn't all that expensive to do that.
And then there's even the, like, we're still entirely on-prem. So server in one rack talking to another server in another rack. I don't care how much data they're transferring between each other, unless the performance is bad. I don't care about the actual cost or latency or whatever, because it's going to be sub-milliseconds. So what are the other sort of data transfer aspects that may be a problem as you move into a cloud environment about where data is stored?
The big one really is the cost, but there are also additional latency factors. So most of the time when you're talking about cloud architectures, you're doing things in multiple availability zones. That means things are going in between data centers. So there's cost and additional latency involved there. And then you're going to have more latency to your users because they're not sitting right next to the servers that they're connecting to. In some cases, that doesn't matter. In some cases, that really matters. And it's just important to understand what your applications require to function correctly before you make the leap to the cloud, because reversing those changes is typically difficult.
Yeah, there's very much, I think the latency is the most interesting one, because your users were in your office connecting to your data center, which was also in your office. So most people have never had to think about latency from end user to application. In a lot of cases, that doesn't matter, especially if you're pulling up like a website, right? You're making a call, getting a website, bringing it back. But when you have traditional client server applications where the client is running on the endpoint and the server is an application somewhere, that latency can become a big deal. And we've even seen this from existing users who need to come over a VPN, they're routing through the internet. And so that application performance may not be as good as it can be. We have some solutions coming for that. Stay tuned. But as we start to build these sorts of things out, what are the things that we're doing today on-prem, right? In this, my users are here, my data center is here, I don't have to worry about latency. What are the other things that we're doing on-prem today that would be a pretty bad idea in a cloud world?
The big one is anything that's synchronous. So web applications are built to be asynchronous. They expect a lot of latency. A lot of traditional applications are built to be synchronous and they didn't expect latency. So every time you press a key, you're actually sending that keystroke up to the server and expecting a response back. Those can get extremely painful to use when you add latency to that situation. The other big one is anything that needs to replicate data between multiple different nodes. Suddenly those can run into massive performance hits because, you do a write on one server, you expected, 1 millisecond for that to replicate to all the other ones. If you increase that to 5 milliseconds, that can really quickly amplify across your application and basically cripple it from what you were expecting to be able to work with.
So basically, don't expect everything to be next to each other in a nice, clean fashion. Your stuff's going to be all over the place.
Exactly. And for things that aren't built for the cloud, that can be a problem.
And I think that's kind of the key here is that when you're starting to think about those sorts of things, your nodes aren't necessarily connected together. And consider it like you have a bunch of virtual machines on hosts in your data center. They're not always going to be on the same host together. They may need to live on different hosts. So how do those things talk to each other in a consistent manner? How do you understand that there's going to be latency when you leave one physical piece of hardware and go into another one? Now extend that to leaving one physical location and going to another physical location. I think that those are the sorts of things. What other things beyond just the technology aspect of it? What sort of things am I doing today in my normal administrative things that would be not a great idea in a cloud world?
That largely depends on which cloud or type of cloud you're talking about. If you're looking at the hyperscale clouds, if you're going in and clicking buttons to make things happen, that's going to translate very poorly to the cloud. The major cloud vendors expect for you to be automating things, using their CLIs, scripting out what you need to do, and expect for their consoles to really be something that you use as a last resort. So if that's not the way that your workflows work right now, it's best to think about either an enterprise cloud that lets you continue working in that way that you're kind of used to, having a console, interacting with things in a graphical and interactive way, or really improve your skill sets for automating deployments and doing infrastructure as code.
And when we start talking about that, that infrastructure as code, you can start that today on-prem. You don't have to do that. That's not just a cloud thing. You can do that on-prem as well. The APIs, vSphere has a full Terraform provider. You can do things with Ansible inside the operating system because Red Hat in an on-prem world and Red Hat in an AWS world are the same thing, or Ubuntu or CentOS, whichever flavor of Linux that you happen to like. So those sorts of technologies and capabilities are the same things whether you're on-prem or whether you're in a cloud. And that may actually be a really great place to start before you make that big leap and jump into a cloud. And I think there's not just the technology aspect of it or even the infrastructure as code aspects, but a cloud strategy is more than just where, right? A cloud strategy involves, process changes because most people think that their processes are still going to be good. And I think in most cases, they're not, right? Or they need to make distinct changes to them to take on the new capabilities of a full hyperscale cloud world, or even any cloud world for that matter.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of those things where, technically speaking, yeah, you can copy and paste your processes that you're using today into the cloud, but then all you've really done is increase your costs because you're paying for the cloud provider's margin and not really change the way that your business works. So all of that digital transformation, all the things that get the business excited, faster features, less downtime, all of that, you really don't get it from moving to the cloud. Everyone has to get a whole new skill set of learning how, AWS or Azure or even EEC works. And then everything lands there, and then everything else is still the same. You just have to work harder to make it all work.
And I think that's actually the bigger picture here, is that your cloud strategy can be tripped up by none of the technology aspects, and can be tripped up by people making silly choices or trying to do the same things that they were doing before. And I think that can lead to the harder parts of a cloud strategy of, how do we actually make this change? How do we get people on board with changing those processes? With, here's how we actually do make changes now. We're not going to wait for the once a month change. We are going to do them weekly or daily to actually get that benefit that our business really wanted. That's why they wanted to go there in the first place. They wanted to move faster. They didn't want to just move for the sake of moving. They wanted to just go faster. So I think all of those sorts of things play into it. And I think as we go forward, I think there's a mix of clouds to actually be able to enable this. And how does enterprise cloud really fit into that?
Enterprise cloud really fits in as that sort of middle ground. It's the place that you can move your workloads to get out of that game of maintaining your hardware, doing VMware patching, replacing drives in your SAN, not have to think about any of that, free yourself up to actually start really looking hard at your processes and seeing where you can improve. And this is scary for a lot of infrastructure people, but where you can really kind of take your hands off the wheel and let other teams that are relying on you self-serve and do the things that they need to do while still maintaining the things that are actually important to that infrastructure group. How do you let developers deploy servers without letting them deploy servers with password 123 as the password? Because they will if there's a way for them to do it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have been white knuckling the wheel for the last 15 years, and trying to get them to let go could be really, really hard. I also look at this as the opportunity from an enterprise cloud standpoint to move into a cloud that works with you, that works with your existing skill set, but then also allow you to figure out what it is that you want to do after that, right? Because we've been VMware admins, we've been network admins, server admins, and those sorts of things over the last 15, 20 years. Where do you go from here? And I think we've actually seen this. We've had customers who said, hey, we migrated all of our servers in, and then we sent all of our admins to coding camp so they can learn how to code, so they can learn how to automate, so that we can actually get this real digital transformation benefit that we wanted to get to. I think if you're an IT leader, moving to the cloud also needs to consider your staff, what they're capable of, and what they want to do, and what their career looks like going forward. And I think this is an awesome opportunity for leaders to be able to show that they're investing into their staff and into their labor, to say, hey, yes, this takes away some of the things that you do on a day-to-day basis, but let's be really honest, this is the part of your job that you don't like. This is the part that you complain about. This is the part where Saturday nights, Wednesday evenings, 1 a.m. sort of things that you don't want to do, that no one ever likes doing. So how do you take this and actually use this to further your career from an admin standpoint? I think that's actually the really powerful part that we don't necessarily talk about as a way forward for organizations, and use this as a lever to say, hey, yes, we're making this big change, but this is also a way for you to put another feather in your cap, right? Like just like going from physical servers to virtual servers, now you become a virtualization admin, right? This is a way to do that. And Mike, what sort of, things have we seen from our organization? I know we've had a number of customers who went from colo to enterprise cloud and even into cloud native, where they were able to take that on because they were able to move their workloads off. So what have we seen from our existing customer base?
It really is that shift. They're going from maintaining servers all day, patching servers, patching VMware infrastructure, offloading all of that work, and then using that free time to learn new things, learn Ansible, learn Terraform, learn how to script things with PowerShell, whatever tools they want to use. And then that lets them advance their career, and every new skill that they pick up usually reduces the amount of toil that they need to perform even more. And so they have even more time to continue skilling up, focus on process, focus on the big picture things that really matter, and not on clicking buttons on a server all day and spending 2 hours deploying a new VM for the dev team.
And I think that's the other part, is that this allows you to do more without having to physically do more, right? And I think that's part of the issue of continuing the hardware cycle of, supporting hardware arrays. And even if you do buy an array, you can even do things like pick up that whole storage array, bring it into our environment, and connect it to our hosts. That's a thing you can do, right? There's also things like, hey, I just want to get out of my data center. I still have a bunch of physical gear, like physical database servers that can land in a colo. Your virtual machines land in EEC, and we can direct connect and even layer 2 connect all of that. So you have the same capabilities you have on-prem and the same latency things that you have on-prem, because you're not ready to make those changes just yet. That's a way for you to accelerate that journey, right? And get a lot of those bigger pieces off the table so you can focus on the things that actually matter. And I think that's the key takeaway, is think more strategically, think a little bit further down the line, and not just rely on hardware to be able to be that crutch for you. Because we see that a lot as a customer or a client who says, hey, we want to go do all of this cloud stuff, but we just replaced this array, so that's going to have to wait 3 years. Every time you do that, you are now delaying your cloud strategy by years at a time. Because again, as Mike opened with, no one wants to say that we're going to take a loss on this array. I have very aggressive air quotes, but no one wants to really take a loss on that array, on that hardware, on that whatever. And I think what needs to be turned around on that is, instead of saying it's a loss, it's saying this is the runway. This is the time that we now have available. This is the time frame, right? And setting aside that time as part of that runway that you've just given yourself, right? You don't have to worry about the array failing, because the array is good. Array is brand new, or the hosts are brand new, or the networking is brand new, whatever. Utilize this as the opportunity and look at things in a way to drive things forward and not have to wait for the hardware to come back around, the warranty to be out of reach, or the warranty to be out of support or something like that. And now it's an emergency, because when you're making decisions in an emergency, you're only trying to fix the problem for right now. So think about these opportunities as this is the next opportunity you have, or this is the functionality you're looking for, and actually drive towards that instead of just waiting for it to be too late for you to make that decision. If there's anybody who has any questions out there, feel free to put them in. Mike and I we've talked a lot about this, and this is something that comes up in a lot of different in a lot of our different webinars. You're going to hear a lot more about that. In fact, coming up next month, and I say next month because there's 4 of them, we're going to do an entire series on ransomware, protect, detect, recover, and we have a special crisis management webinar that I'm very excited about, because it's not something we ever talk about. We only ever talk about the technology aspects. So we're going to talk about the people and process aspects of a ransomware attack as well. We also have some incredibly exciting announcements coming up towards the end of September and early October that you're not going to want to miss. Also, if you'd like to know maybe what those are, go into the VMworld content catalog and search for Expedient. Maybe you'll see what it is. We thank you all for joining us this week. Join us. We will not be here next week. Enjoy your Labor Day weekend. We will be back on September 9th. Yes, September 9th to talk in the first installment of our ransomware series, Protect. It's all about how to protect yourself from a ransomware attack happening in the first place. We have a ton of things to talk about in regards to that. And we will see you on the 9th. Be safe. Have a safe Labor Day weekend. Enjoy.